while Adam gets Windows working, I'll tell you about it. So Concert is a collaborative audio organization tool.
Oh, that is also okay.
So basically, the use case that I always have in mind is, say I have a band, and what we do is record a lot of our recordings, a lot of our practices, sorry, and maybe like, we just have recordings here and there from like riffs and things. So what we could do is upload all of them to Concert, one person can upload them, and then all of the band members can log in and collaboratively organize these audio files. And the way we implement that is by allowing the user to highlight a section of the waveform and tag it as like, acoustic or something. And then at the end of the day, you have a collection of acoustic riffs or whatever, and you can, further collaborate on them when you get together in person. So yeah, I'm going to tell you about what we've done once the event's week.
So, yeah, Colin told you about Concert. I don't know how to change slides here. Nice. Alright, so just as a quick overview, this particular iteration we've been kind of going over the UI and then the REST API. UI development, we finished up some wireframes and then created some mock-ups, stepped through to beginning to do some some implementation, and so I'm going to just talk about the mock-up real quick, briefly, and then get onto the REST API. So this is our mock-up as it currently stands. One of the big points we wanted to focus was utilitarian design. The color schemes, the shapes, all right angles, and the typeface all kind of work together to communicate that this is a tool to be using. We've been talking a lot about behaviors, specifically with this this tag, browsing and searching tags, and then also behaviors for the waveform, how a user might go about selecting a segment, creating a segment, or moving about the playhead. There's a lot more information on our blog on the waveform behavior. And Colin and Adam are going to talk about the rest of it.
So yeah, we thought we'd tell you guys about how we're using REST API and sort of challenges we had and how we figured out how to fix them.
Wait, before you start, Colin, just because there are new people here, we've been working on Concert for like a year now. So there's a lot of code that's already written, and we're kind of transitioning things, getting from the beginning to the end, so to speak. So rather than talk about like high-level stuff without actually having a demo to show you, we thought it's more interesting to actually tell you what we've been working on in the past couple of weeks, which is why the REST API is the primary point of our presentation as opposed to Concert in general.
So REST API, for those of you who don't know, is basically a standard way of using HTTP, and allows you to manipulate your application's resources and objects in a standard way. So like with HTTP, you have these 4 verbs, right? Sorry, I'm going just kind of quickly because we're kind of going to get to like how we're using it. For anyone who doesn't know, right, these are like different types of HTTP requests you could send. So in a REST API, you have these sort of 2 different kinds of resources. One is a collection of objects, and one is a object itself. Sorry, it's 2 different kind of resource URLs, right? So the idea is that when you send get, put, post, or delete requests to a collection URL or a element URL, as they're calling it here, different things happen. Like get, if you want to send a get request to a collection, you're going to get the entire collection back. If you just send it to a resource, you're going to get the single resource. Put is used for updating objects, post is creating them, delete is deleting them. So the way we use REST API is to allow us to easily modify our Django models. So there's this project called Django TastyPie, which is a REST API, like hook, I guess, into the Django models. Like, it's probably not the best way to describe it, but what it's doing is it's exposing our Django models through REST API without us having to write any code. And then we use Backbone.js, which is an awesome JavaScript framework for manipulating those resources on the client side. We have a presentation on Backbone.js there if you guys want to check that out. So, like, what does this all mean? Well, if we send a post request to this URL, in Concert we have this idea that a user can request to join a group, because you don't want just anyone joining your group and deleting all your audio segments. So, like, you know, your request to join the group has to be approved. So the request on the end of the URL, I know it's confusing, is talking about our request to join group object, not an HTTP request. So you can see that this user number 2 wants to join collection number 1. So this is the data we send to the REST API, and what we get back is the full request object, join collection request, join group request, right? So, like, the ID, right, this is the first request that was made. So if you send a get to that same URL, what you're going to get back instead is the list of request objects. So the same goes for users, anything else. So this is how we do it. We have, sorry to go too fast. We have the request model, which represents we call groups collections. So a user that attribute is referencing has requested to join this collection. And then we have our TastyPie resource, which doesn't always have to map directly to a model, but in this case it does. So in this case the request resource is exposing that request object. And in Backbone we have, if you want to create a new request, here we're sending the user and the collection, and what that's going to do is that HTTP request that I had before, so that's how you create a new request object. That's how a user joins the collection, or requests to join. So now Adam's going to talk about specifics and such.
Yeah, so in our specific implementation of a REST API, we ran into a couple of issues because it can get kind of complicated when you're dealing with many-to-many relationships, dealing with objects that span beyond just simple attributes. And specifically this became a problem when we were trying to implement our event system. So for those who aren't familiar, events in Concert are somewhat of like a pseudo Facebook notification. Anytime an action takes place on our system that could be significant to an end user, we automatically create an event alongside it, and then events are populated down to users to view. Yeah, so when you're implementing this in a non-RESTful way, every action that could be significant to a user has its own URL and method associated with it. So all those verbs that Colin was talking about, each one of those has an explicit view set for it, for those who have dealt with Django before. So hooking in event creation is very explicit. Anytime that method gets called, you create an event alongside it. But when you switch to a RESTful architecture, you've got prescribed actions or verbs for you. So hooking into them when you want to do something beyond create or update or post or delete becomes a little more complicated. And this was basically what we had to deal with. Next slide. Alright, so give a tangible example. In Concert we have this idea of being able to tag segments. So we have a model class called tag. And for all intents and purposes, a tag is just a label on top of a group of audio segments. So the old way, what we would do is we'd have a couple of URLs, say add segment to tag or delete segment to tag, and we'd hit either one of these URLs with a post request corresponding with some arguments that define what tag we're talking about and what segment we're talking about. The view, the method that these URLs correspond to would then just take care of everything, bada bing, bada boom. The issue with this is when you're doing kind of CRUD operations, you're writing a lot of redundant code in each one of these URLs. So every action that these URLs would correspond to kind of gets old after a while. And there's no kind of standardization like Colin was talking about. So when it's time to write client-side code, everything is very coupled to your backend, and that's just not like maintainable code. So that's kind of the initiative, the fact that we actually had a pretty intensive client-side code base to actually move over to the REST architecture. Next slide. So the new way of doing it in a RESTful manner is we have our tag resource, and let's say we wanted to, like I said before, tag an audio segment. Now segments, an audio segment is another model defined somewhere else in our Django backend. So it's related to a tag object. So if we wanted to add to that segments list, we would have to hit the tag object with a put request, an update request. Now this becomes an issue, going back to what I was talking about before, when we're trying to create events. Because a put request just signifies that we're updating this object. Whether or not we added or deleted from segments is irrelevant. Put request doesn't define that. Or we could have just changed the name of the tag. We don't know. So how do we know whether we want to create a tagged audio event or delete a tagged audio event? It's impossible to distinguish using this naive method. So we put this out on our blog, we don't know what to do. Graylin came to the rescue and showed us a piece of the doc from Tasty Pie, which is still in beta, so the documentation can be kind of fuzzy, of doing nested resources. And basically what a nested resource is, what Colin was saying before, resources don't have to map one-to-one with your model, with your Django model. You can write resources that have relations built into them. So, next slide. We transitioned what used to be this resource into, next slide, this resource, which signifies there's a relationship between the specified tag and the audio segment that you want to add, delete, or update. And what this allows us to do is instead of putting to this URL, we can post and delete directly to this URL. And post and delete are much more concrete of actions which we can then hook our event system back into. Right now this is hard-coded for any related, any model that has a related field, but what I'm hoping on doing is being able to push this into the Tasty Pie source so that anything that has a related field gets kind of these nested resources out of the box. Maybe Tasty Pie would pull that, and that'd be really cool for me. Anyway, yeah, so thanks to Graylin, thanks to you guys for listening, and we'll take questions now. If there are any.
So how difficult was it to actually do that?
After I figured it out, it wasn't difficult at all. But the documentation, like there's TBAs everywhere, to be continued, and it pretty much just took sitting on the IRC channel for a couple of hours and finally waiting for the lead dev on this to get on and kind of walk me through what different stuff did. What's going to be real fun is trying to make it generic so that it works for every model.
So I haven't been here before, obviously, and I'm curious why you went with the web framework in the first place. What are you interested in? So you talked about this is for bands and for recording audio samples. Like, how would a band actually use this? It sounds interesting.
So you just basically upload your raw recordings, your raw audio files, and then you assign them to your group, and then anyone who's a member of your group can see what you've uploaded, and they can highlight sections and tag them.
So in theory, like other band members would go later and look at things, or like other people on the web would go and look at your stuff?
Right now we're focusing on like a community that's already established, going to the tool
So like
to start to use it. Yeah, so there's no concept of like sharing with the world. It doesn't really make sense with like the way we're, yeah, it's definitely something that like we could expand upon.
Sounds cool. Thanks. Hopefully it will.
And so, just related to that, so when you do this, so you could upload like a 20-minute recording of a session you guys did, and then your tool would let you segment that and then tag those segments and organize them. So you wouldn't necessarily need to rip them apart like on the local computer.
Yeah, right. It's not actually on the server. It's not even segmenting the audio file either. It's just storing where your sections begin and end. And
but
then
it gives the appearance of being able to do that.
So RESTful sounds like it's a pretty groundbreaking change with how you guys can interact with the browser and send requests back to the server. And all of it sounds like really cool and really great and everything. I might have missed something. How's the transition to RESTful going? Is it done, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, except for these nested resources, yeah, I mean it really, all we had to do was like delete our code
Right.
and just like there's nothing much to do. I mean, there's a little bit that we have to implement, like for authorization. You want to make sure like the users only can access the files in their groups and stuff like that. But I mean, yeah, it's pretty much the way to go. If you have like our application right now is like 60% JavaScript, and you know, we're just starting the front end really. So like the back end's pretty much done. Just to give you a little bit of idea of like our application is pretty much just the interface. Like the back end doesn't do anything, just
Wow.
accepts some audio files, right?
Which is kind of one thing that I was thinking about that I thought someone would ask, and I'd kind of be up here blushing, is like, if REST is the way to go, why does Django even bother using the model view template paradigm to begin with, right? When you're dealing with smaller scale apps or applications that aren't so client-side heavy, model view template works fantastically. But in order to keep the state of our application consistent between the client and the back end, this stuff is definitely the way to go. Because this framework that Paladin's using, backbone.js, he's pretty much got identical copies of every object that we store on the back end on the client side, which is like tremendously fast to have all that local information. So yeah.
I'm sorry to ask like another question. So, is it difficult to work against the paradigm that Django asserts? I mean, I know you guys want to work with Python because it's really easy to chop up audio and stuff like that, right? And that's
It
a
is
huge.
if you want to make a super Ajax heavy application like this, where like you have so much information that you need to store on the interface that yeah, it's pretty. You need to write a view, like Alan was saying, for like tagging segments. You need to write like all these Python functions for every single thing you want to do, and yeah, it's not really practical. Another thing is that you know, if we ever want to like get rid of Django, like I said, our code is 60% JavaScript, and it's like server agnostic. Really, it just the new server would have to talk this language, this REST interface, and like it would be good.
How many clients do you have? This is how many people are you essentially the band members? How many band members do you expect to work on this?
Yeah, we're really not sure. I mean, like, I only picture like a few, like maybe like 10 people per group maximum, but I mean, really it could be any amount.
Yeah.
I think we're running out of time as far as our portion of this.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're down to like talk to people about it later. Yep.